Imagine a lonely figure at dusk, clutching a bottle, scrolling endlessly on their phone, or overindulging one more time. What if that desperate craving or itch to escape was more than weakness or bad habit? Carl Jung believed it was a spiritual cry for meaning, not mere madness. In a famous letter, he wrote that an alcoholic's craving was the equivalent on a low level of the spiritual thirst of our being for wholeness, an anguished longing for union with something greater. In this video, we'll explore Jung's radical view of addiction, with insights from Dr. Gabor Maté and Ram Dass and what it means for overcoming it. Could your addiction actually be a call from your soul? What if true recovery comes from meeting the pain, not just quitting the substance? Think about that as we dive in, and leave a comment if this resonates with you. Gabor Maté, a renowned addiction expert, flips the usual question on its head. The question is not, why the addiction? The question is, why the pain? In other words, addiction is typically an answer to a problem, not the problem itself. Maté bluntly states, addiction is not the problem itself, but the underlying pain. When we stop blaming willpower or brain chemistry alone, a different picture emerges. Addiction is a coping mechanism born of trauma, loneliness, or unmet needs. Maté uses a Buddhist image, the realm of hungry ghosts, to capture this emptiness. He describes its inhabitants as gaunt creatures with scrawny necks, small mouths, and enormous bellies, constantly seeking something outside themselves to curb an insatiable yearning. The aching emptiness is perpetual because the things we hope will soothe it are not what we really need. In plain terms, addicts chase substances or behaviors to fill a void that those things can never truly fill. It's like trying to drink water through a straw that's too small. The thirst only grows deeper. This perspective dispels common myths. Addiction is not simply a moral failing, selfishness, or brain disease on its own. As Maté emphasizes, addiction is not a choice that anybody makes. It's not a moral failure, nor is it an inherited brain disease. It is a response to human suffering. In practice, this means we must ask what suffering or trauma drove someone to that escape. When we see addiction as a signal of unhealed pain, we can replace shame with compassion. Transition, understanding addiction as a symptom of pain, primes us to ask deeper questions. If it's not just a disease of the body or will, then what deeper need or crisis is it signaling? Here, Jung's insights offer a profound answer. Jung viewed addiction as fundamentally a spiritual problem. He famously told an alcoholic client, "I thought you were a hard drinker, but you're what people call a real alcoholic, and the only thing that's going to help you is some sort of spiritual experience or spiritual transformation." In Jung's view, when life has no deeper meaning, our souls scream out. He taught that only a symbolic life can satisfy the soul. Our soul may never have rest in anything which is beneath itself, Jung observed. Mundane routines and fleeting pleasures feel hollow, leaving us restless. Addiction often fills that emptiness temporarily, but no substance or habit can substitute for what's truly missing: a connection to meaning, creativity, or a sense of the sacred. This idea appears in Jung's letter about Alcoholics Anonymous, where he calls drinking a shadowy echo of the spiritual thirst of our being for wholeness. In other words, the addict's craving is a misdirected search for union with something larger. Similarly, spiritual teacher Ram Dass reminds us that when we feel cut off, there is incredible pain, and in some profound way all of our actions are an attempt to return back into the one. Our compulsions, whether to drugs, food, relationships, or busyness, are really bids to reconnect our fragmented selves. Reflection, consider your own cravings. In moments of temptation or despair, what is your soul truly seeking? Are you chasing connection, comfort, freedom, or meaning? Think of an inner child or wounded part of you that might be crying out. Jung would say your symptoms, the addiction, are the language of those hidden parts. By listening inward, we glimpse the deeper longing beneath the surface. Jung introduced the concept of the shadow, the unconscious parts of ourselves we deny or repress. In addiction, the shadow often runs the show behind the scenes. Jung referred to addiction as a transpersonal archetypal shadow, or archetypal evil, a force that can overwhelm reason or will. In practical terms, this means that the unresolved emotions, unmet needs, or destructive patterns we shove into the dark can erupt as compulsive behavior. Recovery then calls us to do shadow work, to gently bring what's hidden into awareness, healing the wounds that drive the compulsion. As Jungian analyst Mary Addenbrook notes, true recovery involves containment, confrontation of the shadow, and finally the relinquishing of ego control. In everyday terms, this might involve therapy, honest self-reflection, or creative expression, any honest dialogue with the parts of ourselves we've been avoiding. The path is not easy. It asks us to feel pain we might prefer to numb, to admit mistakes and take responsibility for harm to ourselves and others. But even practical programs like AA encapsulate this process. Their 12 steps urge us to recognize and take responsibility for our personal shadow and to make amends. This acknowledgement is a leap from darkness into light. Some concrete steps or practices might include facing your pain, Allow yourself to feel the hurt or emptiness you've been fleeing. Journaling or mindful meditation can help you tune in, embracing your shadow. In Jung's words, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control your life. Paraphrase, a therapist, support group, or even trusted friend can safely witness your inner turmoil. For example, AA's steps encourage individuals to recognize and take responsibility for their hidden issues, finding meaning beyond the habit. Nurture a symbolic life, engage in art, nature, service, or spiritual practices that feed your soul. This supplies the wholeness your shadow has been craving. Building connection. Jung warned that an unrecognized spiritual need is in danger of perdition without help. The protective wall of human community, friends, mentors, support circles, can hold your pain and keep you safe. In group meetings or communities, we often discover that we are not alone in our struggles. By taking these steps, we turn addiction on its head. Instead of waging war on a behavior, we welcome the message beneath it. With patience and courage, we begin to reintegrate the lost pieces of ourselves, and the self-sabotage cycle starts to break. To truly overcome addiction, we must also look at the wider canvas: trauma, society, and identity. Science shows that most addicts have endured early trauma or deep wounds. Maté points out that virtually all the people he treated had been serially traumatized as children, and that addiction is often an attempt to escape suffering temporarily. This means healing cannot happen in isolation. It often requires addressing that trauma through therapy, trauma-informed care, or community support. Society often stigmatizes addiction as a choice or crime, but this only deepens the isolation. Jung warned against this narrow view. He believed that connection and understanding, not just abstinence, are the true antidote. Indeed, Maté famously said, addiction is best viewed not as a crime or illness, but as a coping mechanism for a personal, spiritual crisis. In practice, this suggests we emphasize social connection, empathy, genuine companionship, group support, instead of mere forced abstinence. On a personal level, exploring spiritual or mindful practices can help fill the void. Ram Dass taught that compassion and presence, even simply sitting with difficult feelings, can be profoundly healing. If you're struggling, consider reading Gabor Maté, S in the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, or Jung's essays on the psyche. Even simple practices like meditation, journaling, or helping others can reconnect you with your true self beyond the addiction. Jung's insight, together with Maté's wisdom, reveals that addiction is not a moral failing or an unchangeable disease. It's usually the soul's cry for healing. In other words, pain is not your enemy, it's a signal. The key is to listen to that signal with compassion. By facing the deeper pain, integrating our shadow parts, and seeking meaning and connection, we follow the path Jung outlined, from despair into transformation. Overcoming addiction thus becomes an inner journey, not a punishment. It's about answering the call of the heart and reuniting with the parts of ourselves we have lost. If any of this resonated with you, share your thoughts below. Have you experienced an aching emptiness behind your cravings? Remember to like, share, and subscribe if you found these insights helpful. Thank you for watching, and may we all find the wholeness we seek.